What's going on, people? Welcome back to the A2A podcast. I am your host, as always, Ryan Holmes. Today, we are sitting down with Taj Dashaun, and this is a different story where he didn't have everything that he wanted on the field. He didn't have everything he wanted in the classroom. And he also didn't really have everything he wanted after graduating college, but he figured it out. And now he's turning all of the turmoil he had during his own career into success, into helping other athletes. So without further ado, let's get to today's conversation with Taj Dashaun.
We're back again, another A2A podcast. Mr. Taj Dashaun is joining me today. Taj, really appreciate you taking some time out. As we were just talking, there's a ton of things that you're involved in, so I can't wait to dig into those. But as always, I like to kind of turn it over to the person I'm interviewing, kind of give a brief intro of who you are, where you're from, and a little bit of background. So Taj, go ahead, introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, man. First of all, Ryan, thank you for having me. Big fan of what you guys are doing at Athletes to Athletes. Big fan of the podcast. I recently started tuning in, so I'm honored to be a guest. A little bit about me. My name is Taj Dashaun. I'm from Southern California. Grew up playing football, and like a lot of athletes, just really struggled when my career was done. Didn't really know who I was, what I was going to do. And after some time kind of floating around in the world a little bit, trying to figure myself out, had some career success and decided that I was going to start helping former athletes. And that led to me starting Thrive After Sports in 2018. And what started out as one-on-one coaching for athletes grew into group coaching and going into universities, started my own podcast, publishing several books, so I'm just really on a mission to help athletes transition and doing that in as many ways as possible.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. I mean, and that's definitely something that is necessary for athletes. I wish it was around when I was just getting out of college, because I was kind of, one of those athletes wondering, how am I going to utilize my degree? Which end is up right now? How am I going to continue to do the things that I love? Staying in sports was definitely the number one priority. So I love what you're doing. And, but let's dig into, that sports background a little bit. You said you played football, but was that your only sport growing up?
Man, I played other sports, but once I started playing football at the age of 10, I dropped everything else, man. They tried to get me to run track in high school, and I went to one track practice. They had us run like 2 miles to warm up. I was like, no, thank you. I'm done with track. This is my relaxing season. So from 10 on, it was just football, but I played everything else leading up to age 10.
Yeah. So what was it about football that had you hooked?
Oh, man, I was a super hyper kid. And me and my brother used to wrestle and stuff like that. So the fact that I could hit people and not get in trouble for it, I love the fact that it was such a violent sport. And I played offense and defense, but I got my scholarship to play defense. So I love laying the hat, man. Just love making contact. And that, like, from that first hit, I was like, yeah, this is the sport for me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Me and you might have to chop it up a little bit afterwards. I was a DB myself. I played some defense in college. So that's where it's all at. I was like, you know what? I can't be the guy getting hit all the time. I need to lay the wood. I need to get out here and really do some stuff. So I feel you on that defense being where it's at. But now as you're going throughout your young career as a young 10-year-old, and you're really getting your feet wet in the sport of football, what was the dream for you? Was it, man, I'm watching the NFL, I'm watching these guys, and, that's what I want to do? Or did you have other aspirations?
Man, it was only football. I had a cousin who was, he's about 5 years older than me, and he actually got a scholarship to play at Cal Berkeley. He played safety there. Kevin Ross, he played back in, I don't even know, early 2000s. But when I saw that inspired me, because I was like, oh, I didn't even know you can get a scholarship, to get a free ride to go to college. So that was my first goal. So by the time I was a freshman in high school, I had my sights set on getting a scholarship, and then of course, when we get to college, and I didn't know you played DB too, man, that's really cool. By the time you get to college, then you're thinking NFL, and everybody going into college thinks, I'm going to the league. I made it to college, I'm going to the league, no question. So it was only football, man. I was so football focused.
Yeah. So as a high school student, when you realize your aspirations of this is what I want to do, how does that change your mindset? How does that change your work ethic, your responsibilities, especially as, and like I said, I had those aspirations too, right? And I was a Division III player, so a little bit different aspirations, right? Not a lot of people make it out of Division III and go to the league, but, as a high school player, you're balancing schoolwork, personal life, trying to be, the popular kid and having fun with friends. And then, you're the athlete on Friday nights and Saturday afternoons. How do you balance all that? And how does your football aspirations fit into that and drive you?
Man, that's such a good point. And this is why I love what you guys are doing over there at Athletes to Athletes, because it's something that's not really talked about. It was super stressful, man. Everybody talks about at the college level, how stressful it is, but at the high school level, it is as well, because, I wasn't super highly recruited. I had like 4 or 5 offers coming out of high school after my senior year. But even just with that small amount of schools showing interest in me, like having phone calls, after work or after practice, not after work, but after school, after practice, and being on the phone late at night with coaches calling and wanting to talk while, trying to do my homework, while trying to have a social life, like you said. It can be overwhelming at times, man. And I remember having this thought of, I can't wait for the recruiting process to be over. You know what I mean? Because this is just so much. Like, I just want to be a kid. I just want to hang out with my friends. So yeah, man, it's very challenging. And then, you hit all the major points, trying to balance your social life and schoolwork, and then trying to make sure that you're putting in the extra hours, after practice, on weekends, going to camps and different things like that to get exposure. So it was a lot, man. It was a whirlwind for sure.
Yeah. Now, did you, who do you have to bounce things off of? You said your cousin played in college as well, and you and your brother. Who do you bounce things off of throughout this process of, how do I manage this, right? How do I talk to these coaches? How can I decipher what's real and what's fake with these coaches? Because, it's all a sales pitch. They all want to get you, under their hat. They want to get you into their locker room. That's what it's all about. How do you, navigate that recruiting process, and who are you talking to get that advice from?
Nobody who really understood. That's kind of why. That's why I say I appreciate what you guys are doing, especially like Reed's whole background story is he went through it personally, and like there's no substitute for being able to talk to someone who's gone through it. Because so my cousin at the time, like I said, he's 5-6 years older than me, so he had already graduated at the time I was getting recruited. He already graduated. We kind of lost touch. He was trying to figure his adult life out, probably like going through the transition like I did, and so couldn't really talk to him. My parents, neither one of my parents, even went to college, let alone got recruited. So they didn't really understand what was happening. They were just excited, like, yes, my baby's about to get a scholarship. They don't have to pay for tuition. So I really, I guess teammates, but we're all kind of going through it, trying to figure it out ourselves. So I guess, to make a long story short, the answer is I really didn't have anyone to talk to, which is probably what made it so overwhelming, because we were all just trying to figure it out, my parents included.
That first phone call, that first letter, what's the thoughts? What's the feelings when, the coach makes that first call or that first letter hits the office at the school? Because I think, when I was in high school, the letters would get sent to the office and you get called down to pick up the packet and anything else. What's that like for you when that first one comes through?
It started out as very exciting because, sometimes you get the generic letters that come in and like, okay, I'm just going to put this to the side. Sometimes you get the letters that are handwritten and you're like, oh, this coach or this school is actually really interested. It started out exciting, even like you said, sometimes we get pulled out of class because there'll be a coach who stopped by the school, you meet with the coach in the office or whatever. And, it was exciting at first. And then once I realized, well, I'm meeting all these coaches, I'm getting all these letters, I'm having conversations, but I wasn't actually getting offered right away. Like I didn't get my first offer till the end of my junior year, and then some more trickled in my senior year. But I was like, man, all this time I'm spending, no one's even officially offered me yet. So it went from excitement to like frustration to like stressed out to like, oh my God, am I going to even get a scholarship? What's going to happen? And once again, I think not having that guidance or someone to bounce these things off of played into that a lot. You're just kind of like waiting, or you feel like you're at the mercy of someone telling you, hey, we want you, we're going to give you a scholarship.
So do you remember what the couple of schools were that were calling and offering you?
The first offer I got was from University of Minnesota. And I was excited because I'm like, it's a Big Ten school. But I didn't want to commit because I'm from Southern California. I'm like, man, it's going to be cold in Minnesota.
Yes, that's a big change for you.
A big change, which is crazy because I ended up going to Stony Brook, which is in New York, right? Mm-hmm. So just as cold. Well, probably not as cold as Minnesota. Excuse me. But so it was Minnesota. It was University of Idaho. I was like, I'm not about to go to Idaho. It was Air Force. I was like, Air Force, that's a great school, but I don't want to be in the military. So
that's a big commitment.
A big commitment, like beyond football. So I was like, that's not going to work. Cornell, there was a couple other, like Cornell offered me, but I had to go to a prep school. Cause I had good grades, but not Cornell grades. So I was like, nah, I'm not going to go to a prep school. And then Stony Brook came in last minute. I actually was still trying to go to Minnesota, and hopefully this helps someone else listening to, so you're not alone. The coach that recruited me to Minnesota, I didn't commit right away. And then that coach ended up leaving like right in the middle of the recruiting process to another school. So my scholarship was basically scrapped. So at the time I was trying to go to Minnesota to play in the Big Ten, my offer was no longer there because the coach left. And I basically was left with Stony Brook, which ended up being the best choice for me. Because I didn't have to go to a prep school, still D1, even though it's, FCS. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we took a visit out there and ended up loving New York, and I went to Stony Brook.
Yeah. So what was it that made Stony Brook the right choice, and how did it check all the boxes for you?
Well, like I said, it outweighed all the other schools, that were offering me at the time because of different variables. Mm-hmm. But I ended up taking a visit to Idaho, and I was like, yes, this is confirmed. I will not be living in Idaho. No disrespect to anybody who's listening for Idaho, but that's, coming from Southern California to Idaho, that wasn't the move. So, and then the other visit I took was to Stony Brook, and it's actually on Long Island, I should say, not in Long Island. And there's a train station on campus that takes you to the heart of Times Square. So that, as soon as we got on the train, 45 minutes into the heart of the city, seeing all the bright lights in Times Square and all that, I was sold. And then the fact that it's a great school academically, it's part of the SUNY system, State University of New York. So very good school. And, the coaches sold us. Maybe this is another point. Coaches came over for dinner and all that. And of course, once you get there, it's a different story with some of the things they promise you. But that was the deciding factor. They did a great job during the sales process, and New York appealed to me a lot. Yeah. And notice I said sales process, not recruiting process.
Yeah, that's what it is. They all have a pitch. They all have the shiny flyer and everything else. And they tell you the best things you can get, right? It's the same thing as, trying to buy a car. Here's the most expensive version. You probably can't afford it, but we're going to show you the best stuff, and just to get you in the car. So, with your newfound nuance now, as you look back on that sales process, as you put it, did you, as a high school senior, and most kids don't really know, but did you have certain boxes that you truly wanted to check, where, I've talked to another girl before who said, this school fit the different boxes, the list of things that I had. And she wasn't worried about whether it was D1. She wasn't worried about the division. She just wanted to play softball. She knew the type of school she wanted to go to and the atmosphere she wanted to be in. Did you have those kinds of things in mind, or did you kind of just get there and say, okay, yes, this feels like a place I can fit?
We didn't really, and I'm saying we because I'm including my family in this. Mm-hmm. We didn't really have like certain, really the only boxes, and this is something that was never discussed. It was just kind of like, I think we all mentally knew. Did we like the coaches? Was the environment something that I could see myself living in? Was it a good school academically? Those were like the things that were on everyone's mind. But like, to me, it checked the box for me because like it's crazy because I wanted to go to a bigger school. Like I said, Minnesota, I originally thought I was going to go to Minnesota. And so to me, I was almost kind of disappointed that I was going to a lower tier school. which sounds crazy in hindsight. Like I got my education paid for. So, but the fact that it was like, yeah, it's D1, but a lot of people haven't heard of it. Just being young and having a huge ego, like that was a box that it didn't check, but it checked all the other boxes, especially compared to, you know, what was on the board. And just back to what you were saying about the, you had me cracking up when you said like the shiny brochure that they show you. Quick recruiting story. The coach who recruited me actually was a receivers coach. And so I actually really liked him, but because he was a receivers coach and I played DB, I probably talked to him like 5 times my whole career there. So that was something that I didn't realize in hindsight. Like I'm not actually going to be talking to this guy pretty much ever. Yeah. You know, so the first time I got out there, I'm meeting my position coaches for the first time and we didn't really click, you know, and even the head coach, he was like, hey, my number was 24, which, you know, is a great DB number. And so he was like, hey, we got number 24 for you. When I went on my visit, like, this is yours. I get there the first day of freshman camp and I go to the locker and someone else's name is on there. And then I had number 36. I was so hurt. I was like, 36, not the Jerome Bettis, not the best. I'm a DB. But Sean Taylor wore 36. So, you know, it's okay. But anyway, man, I had to share that recruiting story just because I know someone probably had the same experience.
I mean, honestly, I did. To be completely honest, I was a single digit in high school. I was number 7. You know, you get there, that jersey's in the locker when you go on your visit, and you know, every recruiting trip, your jersey's in the locker. And you know, I went to Wilkes University, and then I get there, and for practice jersey is number 7. It's in the locker. You know, the backup quarterback had the same number as me, but his was a red jersey, so it didn't really make a difference to me. I'm thinking, okay, I was told I'm going to get my number. Game time comes, you know, you get to roster week, whether you know you're traveling or not, and my name, I look in the single digits and is nowhere to be found. I keep going, and there's number 40 next to my name. I'm like, how am I going to swing this? You know what I mean? Like, and I immediately, and my brother went to the same school as I did. Him and I are 8.5 years apart. I call him. I'm like, hey, how do I deal with this? Like, I was told, he's like, listen, it doesn't matter. Go play. You'll be on the field. Just know if you want to change your number later, you can change your number later, but you're a freshman. You gotta, you know, prove that you earned that number. So I had the same type of experience. I made the phone call to my brother. Like I said, what did you do when you're not clicking with the coach? You're the person that recruited you. You're actually there during practice to frustrate him because he's the wide receiver coach. You know, your number's not right. You know, how was the campus atmosphere? How was the classroom atmosphere? I mean, the first 3 things when it came to the reason that you went to the school for football, essentially, to, you know, let's call it what it is. We're going for our sport. We're rarely going for that academic side of it. Those 3 things aren't clicking. What kept you there and what kept you from leaving?
My parents, honestly, because I was trying to transfer. I was like, maybe I'll go D2. I don't know. Like, this ain't going to work. They were like, just stick it out, write it out. And I guess, you know, it ended up being the best decision. But it was hard, man. Like you said, the position coach, we did not click. I had like 3 different position coaches during my time there, and I didn't care for any of them. The head coach ended up being a totally different person than he was during the recruiting process. The jersey number, did you ever get did you get number 7 back or no?
No, I wore 26 the last couple of years. The last 3 years, I was 26.
That's a solid number, though. Like, I had 36 for all 4 years, and I would try to get it changed. You know, it would be the next hottest recruit who was coming from a big-time school. You know, like Stony Brook was a place where a lot of FBS players came, you know, dropped the level down to FCS. So they always gave single digits, and number 24 was never in my hand. So I was always frustrated about that. The campus life, the only thing that really checked the box was the academic side of things, which ultimately was a challenge. It's a catch-22. Like, yes, it's a great school academically, but I was so stressed out, you know, especially trying to balance football and everything, that keeping up with that level was tough academically. Like, I graduated by the grace of God because it was a challenge. So that box was checked. But even like campus life was a challenge. One thing I didn't know is that Stony Brook is a commuter school. So as excited as I was to, like, you know, party on the weekend, blow off some steam from crazy weeks, a lot of the people at Stony Brook, they commute from the city. So campus would be like a ghost town most of the times. And I didn't know that. So we would all have to go into the city if you want to have a good time. And I blew a lot of my stipend check in the city, Ryan, like a lot of it, man. So, but yeah, yeah, that's my answer to your question about the boxes being checked. Kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it was tough. What was that? I mean, maybe it was the academic side. You know, what was your major? Did you declare as soon as you came in? And, you know, is that the part where you said, I'm getting a really good education that I can then, you know, use for the rest of my life? What was that? Was that one of the deciding factors?
So I didn't even know what I wanted my major to be. I kind of thought about, you know, going into physical therapy. And when I got there, here's another sob story, but I know that's why we're here, because hopefully, you know, this is not to scare people, but to help people. So I wanted to be a business major because I was like, you know, I don't really know what I want to do, but I want to go into business for myself. And, you know, here I am. I became an entrepreneur after several years, but, you know, I didn't have the GPA to get into like the business, like to become a business major. And so I ended up getting into physical therapy. Like that was my next choice. Mm-hmm. And then because I was like, maybe I'll be a physical therapist. You know, a lot of athletes think that way. And then I did like an internship and I was like, I don't want to do this. And then also my GPA started to sink a little bit and I got put into a basket weaving major, you know, the underwater basket weaving major. It was basically, it's multidisciplinary studies. You know, I don't know if you've heard of that one, but you know, that's one of the ones they put you in just to make sure you graduate. Yeah. And I share that because I want people listening, you know, parents and current athletes, especially if you're going to be working closely with athletes to athletes, like make sure you have more autonomy and control over the major that you pick. Like I just let them put me into a major because, oh, this will ensure that you graduate because it's easy. And in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I didn't do that. I wish I gave it more thought or maybe talk to my parents about it instead of just settling for whatever they gave me. Yeah, just the word to the wise right there.
Yeah. I mean, you hear, you know, athletes getting kind of easy majors. You know, I think I can't remember what the player was. It might have been like Matt Leinart or something, had like a VCR programming class. I think they said that during like the bowl game all those years ago. And then, you know, you hear about cattling and, you know, how they put a certain number of athletes into one major so they can control their schedule to make sure they never miss the games or the extracurricular that they're making money off of these athletes for. So you hear a lot of different things when it comes to schools. And so you're right. I mean, you really have to kind of hone in on what it is that you're interested in. So now, like, let's talk football career a little bit before we get into the postgraduate years. How was the career? Would you say that you had a fulfilling career? Would you want to go back and redo anything? You know, what's the football career like? What's life like on the field for you?
It was terrible. So another another sad story, man. You know, and I think it was kind of like a series of unfortunate events. So I'm not the guy who's going to come here and say like, oh, well, you know, I got injured or, you know, they just didn't give me a fair shot. I mean, part of that is true, but nobody wants to hear that. But, you know, what really happened was Hofstra, which was like the major university on Long Island, much bigger than Stony Brook, had a powerhouse football program in the CAA. They actually canceled their football program going into my sophomore year. So I didn't play my freshman year, you know, special teams every now and then. Sophomore year, I was like, this is going to be the year that I start. Hofstra cancels their football program. So all those football players from Hofstra came over to Stony Brook. So automatically starting positions because Hofstra used to whoop Stony Brook. So all of them are starting over me. You know, some of them graduate. I'm like, okay, junior year is going to be the year. Then a bunch of schools, because Hofstra, you know, those players coming over put Stony Brook on the map. What happened is, like I said, a lot of players, especially on the East Coast, like players from Maryland, players from Rutgers, if they weren't playing at their school, they would come down to Stony Brook so they could compete. So anytime a corner or any DB came from a bigger school at Stony Brook, without any sort of like practice under our belt, it was like, this person's automatically ahead of Taj no matter what. So really, like, honestly, I ended up being the player, unfortunately, for all 4 years where I was really only special teams, or I got in if there was significant injuries from the players they had put ahead of me, or, you know, we were up by 50 points. And I think that led into a lot of, when I was done playing, a lot of like, not only did I not make it to the NFL, but like I even had a trash college career. So I was just really at a low point once I came back home from Stony Brook because of all those events that took place, you know?
Yeah. Mentally, and this is something that is now talked about a lot more than what it used to be. Mentally, how are you handling all these things? You know, you hear a lot of horrible stories about athletes at a high level that can't handle it mentally. And, you know, mental health is a very big deal nowadays. It's not something that's whispered, it's something that's shouted now. How are you handling all of these factors for you that aren't going your way mentally?
Man, I was really, really struggling the whole time. And I think I masked it with just partying, you know, like you already know the college environment. You can go out and drink pretty much every day of the week. And a lot of times I was, at least like Thursday through Sunday, but it was very challenging for me. I think just, you know, it was a shot to the pride and to the ego where I felt like I wasn't getting a fair shot. So I wasn't performing well on the field. There were times where I felt like, because my mental health, or just because, you know, I was so down sometimes that I just, you know, didn't want to go to class or didn't feel like doing my work, or I was too exhausted. So all those things kind of like spiraled. And I really didn't have this, you know, I didn't have the experience that I envisioned for myself. So it definitely took a toll on me. And my mental health suffered like tremendously throughout my college career. I mean, thank God, you know, our teammates are like our safe haven, like our brothers and our friends. So I had wonderful teammates, but that was really only the highlight, is like my teammates and partying with my teammates while I was there. You know, everything else was like dismal, you know, the whole time. So it was rough. It was definitely, and mental health wasn't, you know, I graduated 2013. So I feel like mental health, that conversation's only been happening for what, like the past 5 years maximum when it comes to athletes. So yeah, that's where I was at.
Yeah. So with things not going right, do you start thinking life after college at this point? Because, you know, if you're not getting the numbers that you want on the field, the NFL is not really going to come calling. I mean, maybe you can go with a tryout or something like that, but they're not really going to give much attention. So do you start looking at life after college as a sophomore, junior, you know, senior, obviously, start thinking, okay, what's the next step for me?
Yeah, probably about, you know, a few games into my senior year. You know, I kept hope alive every year. Like, this is going to be the year that I start. And, you know, so like a few games into my senior year, I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. But the crazy thing about it is, and I know a lot of athletes, especially because the work I do now with athletes, I know that there's this this feeling that like the world's just going to come to you, right? So I'm like, okay, well, the NFL's not working out or not going to happen, but when I get back home, everything will be fine. Like, I play football, somebody's just going to be waiting on me with like a 6-figure job. You know, everything's going to come to me like it always has. So I didn't put too much thought into it. I just kind of, there was really no planning. Like I said, my major was pretty much, you know, irrelevant, and I didn't have a clear vision for what I wanted to do with my life. So when I came back home, I was just like floating in the breeze, like trying to figure things out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. So what did you do? What's the next step? What was the next move once you got home?
Well, I always say I had an extended college because a lot of my teammates who all went on to play college ball, they were back home and we were back in our hometown. And so we just went out and like continued drinking because we were all lost and frustrated and didn't know how to articulate what we were going through. So for a period of time, there was no figuring it out. There was just like depression and trying to mask what I was going through, you know? And, you know, at a certain point, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. And, you know, I don't say that to tell anybody to just suck it up. Like, if you're having mental health issues, like, get some help or, you know, do what you need to do to process. But I hit a point where I was like tired of waking up hungover, tired of like, I just woke up one morning like, man, I'm back in my childhood bedroom with no type of income coming in. Like, I'm not happy with where I'm at, but I should at least be doing something to get myself out of that position. So I just started working out again, stopped drinking, stopped partying, took my self-improvement, you know, more seriously, reading, listening to podcasts, filling my mind with positive things. and started applying for jobs, even though I didn't know what the hell I was doing, just like looking for something so I could get some money coming in, but it was definitely a process.
Yeah. So how did we get here, with Thrive After Sports and the long list of things that you're now involved in? How do we get here?
Yeah, man, the way it started out was, so I knew I kind of didn't want to work a typical 9-to-5 because I saw my parents, and I'm very grateful to my parents. They gave my brother and I a great life growing up, but I noticed they always came home like drained, tired, and they weren't enjoying what they were doing. So I was like, man, whatever I do, I want to make sure it's something that I enjoy. And I didn't know what that was. So I'm like, at least in the meantime, let me just try to get something so I can get back on my feet, get some money coming in. So my first job was in sales, and I'll give you the quick version, but I started out in sales, got me back on my feet. I was able to move out. I was making good money, but ultimately I felt unfulfilled. And so I made a pivot into recruiting because I was like, okay, that's kind of an easy pivot. I'm still kind of selling, but almost like helping people land jobs and put food on the table for their families. So that was very fulfilling. And recruiting led me down a good path, which is, it's kind of similar to my skill set now with, the way I work with athletes, helping them get matched with the right, fit for them career wise. And right around 2017, 2018, like I'd already been in the workforce for like 4 or 5 years at that point. I got totally burned out with like the 9-to-5 lifestyle, having to go sit, at a desk every day. It was killing me. Being told when I could go to lunch, like I like to eat all throughout the day, not from like 12 to 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that lifestyle was killing me. And I started looking at how can I break out of this? And, how can I break out of this while also having the freedom to operate on my own? I thought about doing all kinds of things like personal training, but I'm like, nah, I don't want to take shirtless pictures on Instagram. Like that's not me. So, but it hit me out of the blue one day. Cause I was really focused. I had a great mentor tell me like, focus on who you want to serve and build a lifestyle around that. I was like, well, I have recruiting skills. I've always been like kind of the big brother figure, even to people who are the same age as me. I'm very good at helping people get clear on what they want to do. Why don't I help athletes, basically help myself, 4 or 5 years ago at that point, help them get through the transition. And when I was researching, I didn't really see anybody who was doing it. There are a few people who became mentors to me, Derek Furlow Jr., Jonathan Orr, still very connected with both of those guys, doing a lot of work with them. But I saw that there was a need for it. And so I put together some curriculum and started putting myself out there, really on LinkedIn at first. And people started gravitating towards it. And the content that I was putting out turned into a podcast. And the podcast turned into a book. And then, the one-on-one coaching turned into group coaching and turned into having like different sponsors and partnerships like Athlete Soul and relationships with universities that sponsor my work. So it was just really looking for who I could help using my skill set, pairing those two things together and continuing to build and stay open-minded with different opportunities and, ways to serve and ways to create opportunities for myself and for others. So, man, that was kind of long-winded, but that's the journey.
Yeah. I mean, the journey's always long-winded. If it was short, then everybody would do it, right? If it didn't have a lot of nuance and a lot of parts to it. So, I mean, I appreciate the fact that I feel like, one of the things for us as athletes, you get to that certain point where the athlete takes over again, where you're down, you're unmotivated and everything else. And then your athlete mindset kind of takes over, and as somebody that played DB, your short-term memory of, all right, that play sucked, but I need to get the next one kind of takes over. And I feel like that's what happened with you is, you were going through it and it was tough to go through. And then it was, you know what, I'm better than this. Like, let's flip the switch. Right. So now that you're down this path and you've got the podcast, the book, you're doing group sessions, but what was that first school that called and said that they wanted to start collaborating with you? And what did that mean to you as a newfound entrepreneur that you were now having a school call you for what you could offer?
Man, I was fortunate, and it's an ongoing thing, right? I think the first one was UCF, because I had a friend, a teammate that I played with at Stony Brook who was in the athletic department. So he kind of, made some connections for me. And then I think that was the first one. And then the list just started to compile. COVID put a kind of a damper on those relationships because, schools were shut down for a while. But that caused me to get creative and start to look at other people, who I could partner with. Like Athlete Soul is an organization founded by Miriam Glaze. She's a former Olympian. I think Reed might be connected with her. But long story short, they raise money for athlete mental health and also like transitioning, out of your sport. So I connected with them. They became a sponsor. I'm able to, access grant money and scholarship money through them to coach. There's an organization like Jonathan Orr. His nonprofit is called Athlete Transition Services. He was one of the first people I reached out to. He's been in the game for a long time. And he's someone who took me under his wing and allows me to come in and do work for his organization, from a coaching perspective. So I had to get creative and get outside of relying on the universities. But then also when I came out with my first book, I realized how much a book can get you into schools, because even if these universities weren't sponsoring my work, they would buy books from me. That's a totally separate budget that they have for like tangible items, educational items. And people would buy like books and give them out to the athletes, put them in the, in the athletic department, or I would do like a speaking gig, even a virtual speaking gig. And they would, add some books as a part of the package to compensate me. So, it's been a process. I'm always trying to find ways to, because the bottom line is I work with mostly collegiate athletes, I've worked with some professional athletes and a lot of Olympic athletes as well. But the majority of the athletes I'm targeting is like former collegiate athletes who are coming out into the workforce, trying to figure it out. And that was me. And so a lot of them can't afford to work with me directly, at least enough for me to make a living off of this. So I'm like, and I never wanted them to come out of pocket anyway. So that's why I've been very creative with finding ways to get them sponsored so I can put food on the table, but they can get the help they need without finances being an issue,
It's pretty cool. So we're at our 5 questions part. And like I said, I'm going to kind of hit you with some questions and, give a little bit of background to it, but let's have a little rapid fire with it. So let's start first with sports. What is a game or a play that you will never forget?
Man, I'm gonna have to go back to high school. Like I told you, my college situation was traumatic. But probably my first interception my junior year, I think. And it was crazy because before the game, I was, how you do walkthroughs and stuff. I was like imagining myself. I wish I would have known more about the power of like visualization back then. Because it didn't even click like, oh, I should do this more often. Because before that game, we were doing the walkthroughs and I was imagining myself like breaking on the ball, like breaking on a slant, picking it off and taking it back to the house. I was just doing it for fun. And I did it like 10 times while we were doing walkthroughs. Like, and then I broke on the ball, picked it off and I'm like, you would think in my mind, I would have understood like you should do that before every single game. But that game was, I don't even remember what team we were playing, but I just remember that moment and how crazy it was that I was doing that beforehand,
What was once you made it to Stony Brook, what was the one thing that really surprised you about the culture there?
In a positive way or a negative way?
any way possible.
Man, so we had New Balances when I first got to Stony Brook, which was crazy. Like they had Nike jerseys before. And then when I got there, I guess, New Balance was a cheaper contract. Well, not the jerseys, but the shoes and like some of the equipment. And so that was like a running joke our freshman year until we switched back to Nike. Like, man, we committed to a school that gave us New Balance cleats. I didn't even know New Balance made cleats. Is this a joke? So that was a surprise. Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah. Career wise, and entrepreneurially, when you look back at, the path that you've taken, what is something that you've learned along the way?
I've learned to just stay consistent and not quit even when things are tough, and to know the difference between like I'm giving up on this because it's too hard, or I'm giving up on this because it's the right thing to do and I need to make a pivot or an adjustment. And I think the ability to, be able to like discern between those two things is like a major key in entrepreneurship. That's been my biggest lessons. There were times when if I really asked myself like, okay, I'm stopping doing XYZ because it's no longer serving me and it's not getting me where I want to go. And there's been times where I'm like, man, I think I wanted to stop doing this because it's too hard. So let me just get that out of my mind and keep pushing. And because I did that, a lot of great things have happened.
Mm-hmm. So what's a goal that you have career-wise for the next year, 3 years, 5 years, something you want to accomplish?
It's so funny you asked that because I'm in a little bit of a transition period. There's like a few forks in a road that I could go right now with what I'm doing. And the main vision that I have, I'll just go like 5 years. The main vision that I have is for me to have other coaches who basically, for me to have my own curriculum for transition coaches, right? And for me to have trained other people to duplicate what I do, and also to have more sponsors. I'm considering turning Thrive After Sports itself into a nonprofit. But to me, I know myself, I would have to put someone in position to do that, to kind of run the operation things. Because at the end of the day, I just love the coaching and speaking on podcasts like this and being more creative and free flowing. So that's a main goal. And then aside from that, helping more people, write and publish and tell their stories to the world in the form of books. That's been an undertaking that I took up like the past 3 years. After I published my book, I joined forces with the publishing company that helped me publish my book. And through that partnership, I'm able to plug, aspiring authors in with those resources to help them from A to Z get their books written, published, and, out to the world. So more books published and more resources to serve more athletes is the best way I could sum it up.
Yeah. And the last question, as you look back now, and obviously you're, excuse me, in the position you're in, you're somebody that looks back at things. You have to really kind of do a retro of the things that you're doing so that you know where you're going. You got to know where you've been before you can get where you're going, right? What's a piece of advice that you would pass on, or something even that you are already telling these next generations of people that are coming out of college or going into college that sticks with you? A piece of advice for that next generation.
Yeah, I would say number one, and this more so applies to athletes as they're thinking about the end of their career or, in the midst of, okay, my career's over, I'm trying to figure out next steps. I would say number one, to just honor where you've been. Even with some of the things that I shared today, they may seem negative, but when it's all said and done, in my mind, I honor the fact that I, played college football at a high level, got my education paid for, and had the experience of, going to college, living in another state. So I honor that. So honor where you've been. Because what that does is it allows you to move past, bitterness or hangups that you may have had about how your career went, and then you have a blank slate. So the second piece of advice is, once you've honored where you've been, be excited about where you're going. Even if you feel lost, use that as an opportunity to not say like, oh, I feel lost, like I did back in the day, but look at it as an opportunity to create. Because at the end of the day, like, all of us have the ability to create the lives that we want for ourselves. It's not always easy. It takes a lot of work. It takes time. You have to ask the right questions of yourself and of others. But be excited about the fact that after your sport is over, you get to literally, create your life and become anything you want to be in this world.
Perfect. That's awesome, man. I really appreciate you, really opening up about your story, about how things didn't pan out the way you wanted them to, but, you ultimately have made it to where you are for a reason. Before I let you go, give people, the list of things that you're involved in, where they can find you, the names of books. I mean, this is literally where I want you to just like kind of let your ego go here at the end and just put it all out there. These are the things I've done. This is what I'm involved in. So I'm going to pass it off to you once again to kind of give a little flex to the people.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. So I would say just visit tajdashaun.com, because that's the hub for everything. All the information, testimonies of athletes I've worked with, all that stuff is on there. definitely listen to my podcast. My podcast is not just me talking. I do have a lot of solo episodes and a lot of interviews with clients, so they can tell you like what their transition was like and how we worked through it and what they're doing now. But also there's a lot of other great people doing, people like myself, former athletes who serve the athlete community. I have interviews with them on there as well. My podcast is available on all podcast platforms. Wherever you listen, just type in Thrive After Sports. It'll come up. And the links are on tajdashaun.com as well. Also on my website, there's, my books. My books are on Amazon. If you want a signed copy, just reach out to me. I'll send you a signed copy. But once again, tajdashaun.com. Taj Dashaun on all social media platforms. I'm most active on Instagram and especially LinkedIn. So if you shoot a message, if you heard this interview, if there's any way I can help, more than happy to support. There's a place on my website where you can schedule a call if you want to talk to me. Sometimes I speak with parents of athletes, as you might imagine, like, hey, my son or daughter is going through this. I'm able to help in that way as well. And yeah, I'm just here to serve. So, hit me up. I'm not hard to find.
That is for sure. So Taj, I really, really appreciate it. We'll make sure that, the links and everything are below for everyone so they can find them. But Taj, this was great. I really appreciate you taking the time out. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll keep in touch, man. Anytime you want to come back on, we can continue to discuss some things, or you can hit me up on Instagram. We'll talk some football all day. But Taj, I really appreciate it, man. This was great.
Ryan, thank you, man. This has been a pleasure. You're an awesome host, man. So I appreciate the time. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. To make sure you don't miss when a new episode comes your way, head to the Athletes to Athletes YouTube page to like and subscribe, or to Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcast. Again, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you again next time.